Hello, it's Maggie, the Cheshire Crafter here. Over Easter, I shared some sewing with you when I made some baby quilts for Project Linus using my vintage Singer 99k sewing machine. I've made some more now, but let me just show you what I've made this week. I'm going to begin to quilt in the centre as usual, and on the last quilt I did with these fabrics, I did a wavy stitch, but I did them about 2 inches apart, and you could see that the wave went about half an inch wide. I'm going to do something down the length of this quilt, so it's going to be a vertical stitch, and I'm going to make it look a little bit like a chain stitch. It's going to overlap, and I'm going to do the stitches around about 2 inches apart. Let me show you. First of all, I'm going to do one wavy stitch right the way down that's going to cover this central seam. So I'm just taking the needle about 1/4 of an inch either side of this seam line and just allowing a gentle curve. You can see how gentle the curve is. It might be easier if I show you on the reverse. It's about half an inch across. Now my intention is to go back over that stitch line again and do the opposite curve. So curve in the opposite direction if I can, to try and make it look a little bit like a chain. So it now looks like a chain in loops. I'll show it you on the back because I think it'll show up a bit better. As you can see, there are varying widths, so this is very much free motion, but it does look like an overlapping chain. And I'm going to do the same now from the front. I'm going to do at about 2-inch intervals apart, going to one side, and then I'll do the other side. I'm only going to do longitudinal on this quilt. There won't be any horizontal quilting. And this is the finished quilt. It just gives a slight different variation. It wasn't difficult to do, and it wasn't too much pull on my muscles either. On the back, it looks like this. So it's certainly worthwhile just considering different stitches that you can use just with a normal presser foot. Right, let me try some different fabrics and see what I can come up with next. So this is a selection of purples and magentas. I've got 2 plains, 2 stripes, 2 gingham and 2 floral. Let me photograph those and show you in grayscale, and we're going to look at the values. Yes, there's enough variety there for me. I'm going to cut these into 2.5-inch strips. So this quilt would be like using a jelly roll. I've just cut those strips at random lengths because this is going to be a random quilt. I'm going to use a Silco again for this. There's no name, it's D209, it's 50 weight, and I'm going to use the same in the thread, the needle and the bobbin. To begin, I'm sewing seam lines to create a horizontal strip, and I'm aiming them to be about 25 inches long. This is slightly longer and I'll cut it down at the end. I'm going to do that first and then start to add those strips together, so I've got a horizontal quilt. Then sew the strips together horizontally. Once it's pressed, we can use the ironing board to create a sandwich, and I've used a pink cotton sheet backing, polyester wadding. I pinned my sandwich together using curved pins. I'll just use this pen and a piece of paper to show what I'm going to do with quilting. I'm going to start in the middle and do a square, and then I'm going to complete a single line going in different directions without taking the needle out. And when I need to turn at 90 degrees, I'll leave the needle in place and then just pivot. I'll do 1/4 first, and I'll return to the centre and start again doing the next quarter. And I'll make sure that they overlap so it looks integrated. Then I'll repeat all full quarters and sew all the loose ends in at the end. So I've folded my quilt and find the approximate middle, and I'm going to do a square, and I'm going to start in the middle rather than on one of the seams, so that my initial square covers these 2 pieces of fabric, and then I'll work out this left-hand corner from that point. I'm always, when I'm pivoting my fabric, I'm going to leave my needle down and pivot the fabric at a right angle, so it's going to be 90 degrees. I'm going to try to avoid doing diagonal lines on this. I want them all to be horizontal and vertical. The aim is to keep working as flat as possible, but to do this, it helps to fold the top and the bottom of the quilt just into a sausage so that I can turn this at all angles with ease. I'm using the same cotton in the top and in the bobbin as I've sewed the quilt. It's a Silco, the same purple thread. You can use an alternative thread on this if you like. A yellow would be really nice here. So now that my square is completed, I'm going to continue to come out in this direction. It can be as abstract as you want it to be. What I'm trying not to do is sew along the seam lines. I'm trying to avoid those, so I go either side if I wanted to. There's no rhyme or reason or pattern to this. It's truly abstract. This is a really good design and a really good project to develop your skills on. If you break your thread like I've just done, just go back to where you ended. I'll sort out the ends later. Now, working along checks or stripes really helps to keep your line straight, and also work in parallel or adjacent to the seam line. You can see I've got a little bit of a puckering there. Can't go back and change that now. I'm working around my pins and moving them as needed. I would say that although I'm not a baster, I think this would be one point where basting, so I'm talking about spray basting with glue from a tin, would be helpful as you're moving your fabric so frequently. But because this is for a baby quilt, you must ensure that you wash it before you give it as a gift. The last thing you want is the baby to inhale glue. You're very aware of the risk of clot death here. So if you're using a basting glue on a baby quilt, always wash it before gifting it. I'm sewing right up to the edge, about a stitch away from the edge. You'll see that I'm sewing right up to the edge, but not off the edge, so that my sewing is continuous line. So that's 1/4 done. Let me show you what it looks like on the back. You see, it's more or less straight. It doesn't matter if there's areas where there's no crossing over and other areas where there's tight crossing over. It's quilted. I'm happy with that. The loose ends I will sew in and bury later. Right, there it is quilted. I just need to trim it down to 24 by 30. And to do that, I'm just going to use my acrylic ruler and a rotary cutter and make sure it's square. I've quite correctly been able to cut off one complete row. So I've got 15 rows of 2 inches, and it always looks much neater. Ignore my sink. Always looks much neater when you've neatened the edges off. Right, let me just add that binding now. I'm going to sit and watch Midsummer Murders tonight while I'm doing that. And I'm adding the binding just slightly away from the edge, and this will in effect also give a basting stitch right the way out, right out towards the edge, because where I've cut, I might have cut some of that stitching off. The other thing that you might notice is there's an awful lot of lint that's come off. I need to get a lint roller both on this and inside my machine to remove any excess lint before I do my next project. You'll notice that I've also changed my cotton thread to white for this. I add the binding like I normally do, so that I have a machine finish on the front and I hand finish it on the back. And so here's the third of the baby size. These are 24 by 30 inch quilts. You can see the quilting easily on that. I'm going to turn it over and show you the back. The beauty of these quilts is you can use up your scraps, you can use any design that you want, and you can practice different techniques in a short space of time that you might want to choose to consider using on a larger quilt. So that's the 3 finished baby quilts for Project Linus, with 3 different quilting techniques and 3 different patchwork techniques. I'm sure that these will go to families that will appreciate them. The babies won't know that they've been donated, but I hope that they'll keep them so that they have a memory of being gifted this in their early months. I hope you've enjoyed watching this series of making these baby quilts. I'm going to work on the child size next. This is Maggie, the Cheshire Crafter. Come back and see me soon for more crafting, won't you? Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and come back and see me soon. Bye.